Today you are going to learn how to create a Think Cell Gantt chart and how to use the respective chart features and functionalities to fully customize the Gantt chart. After having watched this tutorial, you will know the different chart elements of a Gantt chart, how to set the date range, insert activities, milestones or responsibilities, and how to customize the layout of the Gantt chart by adjusting scales and separators. So let's jump in. To insert a Gantt chart in PowerPoint, we start with a blank PowerPoint slide. Now click on the Insert tab, choose Elements from the Think Cell area, and on the very bottom you can see Gantt or Timeline. Left click, choose the position where you want to insert the Gantt chart, and again left click, and a default Gantt chart is inserted. The default Gantt chart that's inserted always looks the same. On the left-hand side, you have an activity column with individual activities that each has a row. In the middle part, you have the timeline or the date range that shows the length of the activities and also individual milestones. However, there's much more that you can show on the Gantt chart. So there's more elements to the timeline, and also on the right-hand side, you can insert responsibilities or remarks. This is how a fully customized Gantt chart could look like. And if you want to jump to specific sections of this tutorial, where I'm going to show you how to adjust those individual elements, just look in the info box below, where I've included the different timestamps. Now that we know the individual elements of a Gantt chart and how it can look like in the end, we want to change the major part of a Gantt chart. So the date range, and we want to insert individual activities and milestones. Overall, there are 3 different methods to change the time frame shown in the Gantt chart. First of all, we have an internal calendar here in Think Cell. To use the internal calendar, you just have to click somewhere on the scale, so either on the month or on the weeks, just by clicking right click, and there you can see there's different options opening up. On the left-hand side, you can see a calendar that says Open Calendar. Just have to use a left click and the calendar opens. The currently shown date range is shaded in blue. If you want to change it, you can just click on a new starting date, use Shift, and click on your new end date. Alternatively, you can also choose this little blue bubble at the very beginning and at the end and pull it to the date where you want to end or start your time period. Once you're done, you can just close the calendar and your changes are reflected on the Gantt chart. Besides using the calendar to change the date range, you can also choose an internal data sheet or an external data or Excel sheet. To open up the internal data sheet, just click on the Gantt chart such that it's highlighted in orange, and then you can see this little table icon at the very bottom right. Double click on the icon and a data sheet opens up. So this is now the internal data sheet where you can change the activities and also the individual dates. Alternatively, you can also use an underlying or linked Excel sheet that looks similar but obviously has more advanced functions and is in the standard Excel layout. If you would like to know more about how to work with the internal or the external data sheet, let me know in the comments and I'm happy to create a separate video. However, for general use, I recommend using the internal calendar of Think Cell because it works perfectly fine and does not depend on external data sources. Now that we know how to change the date range of the Gantt chart, let's look at how to insert activities, milestones, or other elements to the Gantt chart. There's 2 parts to adjusting activities or milestones. First, the text in the column on the left-hand side for activities, but also text in the Gantt chart itself if you want to label individual activities or milestones. And we can also change the actual length of the individual activities displayed as those horizontal bars or other, for example, small rectangles for milestones. So let's use a simple example to demonstrate the use of the various fields and functionalities. Say we have a project with 4 major activities and several sub-activities. First, let's label the column header, and instead of activity, let's say it's a project. And as you can see, each of the individual labels you can customize. So if you click on the label, there's a blue border showing up and you can change the text. Also, as you could see, the column width of the first column automatically adjusts based on the maximum length of one of the entries. However, if you say, I do not want to have such a broad first column, you can simply use the Enter button, click on the position where you want to insert a line break and just use Enter, such that the line break is generated and the column width decreases. Now we have our 4 activities and also 2 additional rows. However, if we say we do not need those additional rows, we can easily delete them. Just click on the row, right click, and there again you see different options. To delete the row, just click on the red X and the row is deleted. However, if you want to say, well, I need an additional row, but not at the very bottom, so for example, below my data analysis, you can just click on the row, use Shift, and pull it somewhere else to a different position in the Gantt chart. So the blue border shows where you would currently pull the additional row. So if I just release, the additional row is pulled below my data analysis row. However, if you want to insert also additional rows, you can just, for example, click on Hypothesis Generation, right-click, and there you can see the icon to insert an additional row. And if you click on it, an additional row is inserted below the one that I've just used. So now you might think the left-hand side does not look really visual appealing because there are separators that we might not want to use in there, and also you cannot really differentiate between the major and the sub-activities. So if there's separators that you do not want to have, you can either right-click and say delete, or you can just click on the separator and use the delete button on your keyboard. If you want to insert an additional separator, for example, below our introduction phase, you have to click on the lower activity row, right-click, and say insert row separator. And now a row separator is inserted. However, it's always inserted above. So if we now say also we want to separate our hypothesis generation and our data analysis phase, click on data analysis and insert a row separator again above of the row. Now you might still say, even though we have our line separators between our activities, I cannot really differentiate between major and sub-activities. However, all of the text fields in the Think Cell Gantt chart are fully customizable. So if you just click on the text field, the floating toolbar opens up. And there you can change font size, but also if it's bold or not bold. So let's bold it. And we can also change the text color. Obviously, you can also use the standard PowerPoint settings to change color, font size, font style, and so on. Now, if you say, well, I can still not differentiate between my major and sub-activities, you can also use the ruler and those little triggers to indent text. So if you click in the text box and pull the trigger to the right, the activity or the text is indented. Once finished with the text labels, let's move on with their visual representation in the chart itself. The activity bars here in blue visualize the duration of an activity and its potential slack or tentative duration, here dashed. So to change the duration for both the actual and the tentative activities, again, there are 2 methods. First of all, you can drag and drop the handles of the activities and adjust their starting and end date. So here you can see the blue line that indicates the start and the end date of the activity. So just drag and drop it to the date where you want to let the activity start or end. Same with the tentative activity. However, you can also use the calendar function by just double-click on the activity and again the known calendar opens. Here it's the same as before. Either use the blue circles and drag and drop the activities, or just click on a start date, use Shift, hold it, and click on an end date, and you have adjusted the time frame. Just close the calendar and the changes are immediately reflected on the slide. Now, if there's two activities at the same time in the same row, you see that they're behind each other. If you want to change that, again, just use the handlebars and drag and drop the activity to wherever you want to let them start and end. If you want to change a solid line to a dashed one, just click on the line, right-click, and choose Set Dashed. Similarly, if you want to change from dashed to solid, right-click and choose Solid. As you could see, if you use a right-click, there's also other settings. So again, you can open the calendar by using right-click, but also you can see an option to add a date label. So let's click on adding a date label and you see the label immediately appears. Left-click on the date label again, the floating toolbar opens. Same with all of the text boxes, you can change font color, and if it's bold or not. However, you can also change if the date range of the activity is shown, only the start date or the end date. Also, you can choose the date format that you want to show here. And also, if you want to use an individual format, you can just type it in the text box here. Further, if you want to label the activities, besides only showing the date, feel free to type in some text in those text boxes. Also, if you want to get rid of the dates or the date ranges, just delete it and only use the text if you want to label activities and explain them. Besides usual activities, there's much more elements that you can insert into a Gantt chart. So let's choose the position where we want to insert another element. The red cross perfectly shows you at which position and date you would insert the element. Right-click, and there you can see the different options. On the right-hand side, a bar that we've already inserted above. Now, let's insert probably the second most prominent Gantt chart element, which is a milestone. Similar to the bar above, you can also change text and color and also format. To do so, just click on the icon and there you can see you can change the color of the icon and also the shape. So instead of triangle, you can use a square, an asterisk, and so on. Also, you can choose the text and the text format by left-clicking on the text box. Again, you can choose the date format, font size, but also you can choose your own text that you can type in the text box. If you want to change the position of the milestone, again, you can either drag and drop it somewhere to on the Gantt chart or double-clicking on the icon, and again, you can choose from the calendar. So let's see which other elements there are. Choose a position, right-click, and let's say we want to add a new process. The difference between a process and an activity is that a process has a chevron shape and the activity only has a bar shape. So again, you can individualize the process by adding a content and also choosing a different color. Further, we have shades or brackets. If you want to highlight a specific time period, I highly recommend using a shade because a shade spans across an entire period. So for example, there's a holiday in October, you can use the bracket and also adjust the time period and label it below such that you can say vacation or holiday and people are, for example, not there. Usually use those brackets and the shades to indicate an overall activity. Similar, you can also use milestones here at the very bottom below the Gantt chart to indicate overall project milestones or events. Just right-click and insert again a new milestone. And since it is an overall milestone below the overall project, such a dashed line is automatically inserted that connects the milestone with the date on which it actually happens. Again, if you want to move it, just drag the handle from left to right. Further, you can also change again the color and the shape of the triangle, so choosing a different accent or a different shape. However, you cannot choose the color of the dash. Last but not least, let's insert separate columns on the right-hand side for responsibilities or remarks. To do so, just click on any row such that it is highlighted in orange, right-click, and on the right-hand side, we have two options. First, to insert a responsibility label column, so let's click on it. And if you do it once more, you also can insert a remark label column. Now you have two additional columns. First of all, for responsibilities, where you can insert individual names that are responsible, obviously, for the activities. But you can also use several names. And in that case, the row just increases its height. And also you can add a remark in the last column. So either this is text, so you can just type in some text. But also if you want to use a more visual indication, you can get rid of the text. So right click and the delete. And you can insert a more visually appealing indication of a remark or a status if you want to say so. So right click on this orange field. And there you have the options again to insert a text label, but also to insert a checkbox or a Harvey ball. If you insert a checkbox, to change it, you just left click on the checkbox again. You can choose if you want to check it or uncheck it. You can choose the text color and also the border color. If you want to insert a Harvey ball, click on the text box, right click, insert Harvey ball, and then Harvey ball is inserted again. Left click on the ball and you can change the filling, the font size, and also the colors. Let's come to a real pro tip here, which is not only valid for this Gantt chart, but also for Think Cell in general. Let's say you want to insert Harvey balls all across this last status column. So you can mark all of those text boxes by checking or choosing the first one with left click, pressing Shift, and now hovering over those text boxes behind. And as you can see with those orange borders, all of them are highlighted and marked simultaneously. Still holding the Shift button, left click on the last one. So now they're all blue. You can get off the Shift button. Now right click and you can choose again between those different options. So let's say switch to Harvey ball and all of the shapes are changed to a Harvey ball. Similarly, let's change them again back to a checkbox. Mark it, press Shift, hover over them, right click and use a checkbox. By using this functionality, you can change similar things much quicker instead of choosing each individual one. Finally, let's look at the responsibilities and if they're the same for similar activities. For example, we have Tom, who is responsible for data analysis, but he's also responsible for its subactivity. So instead of typing Tom and again Tom in the next text cell, you can just right click on the first text field, choose the bracket, pull with this handle. So now you have Tom that is responsible for data analysis and its subactivities. Finally, let's look at how we can customize the layout of our Think Cell Gantt chart and adjust it based on our personal or project preferences and needs. We've already done so for the first and the last columns. This is why we're now going to take a look at the middle, the major part of the Gantt chart, so the date range. Right now, month, week, and also days are shown. And if you want to change that, just click in either of those cells by using the left click. And the floating toolbar opens up. There you can see a vast range of different options that you can choose from. Again, you can change the font, but also the date format. Also, you can choose if the cells are filled or not filled. You can change the weekly settings. So if you want to show the whole week or the work week only, which might be useful for some cases, at which day the weekends are, and also on which day the week starts. What is also quite useful is those scales and separators. So there you can choose what type of scales and also borders you want to show. Right now we have chosen month, weeks and days. So if we want to get rid of, for example, the days, only the month and weeks are shown. You can also choose quarters or years, so whichever hierarchy you want to use. Same with the separators. Currently they are shown for month and weeks. We can, for example, get rid of the weeks and insert quarters and so on. In some cases, you might also want to label what is shown here in the Gantt chart on top. So for example, if you want to insert a label for this weeks, just right click. And again, different options open up and there you can choose add a scale label. And on the left hand side, the scale label is inserted. Same with the month or the year, right click, choose scale label and it's inserted on the left hand side. So everyone that looks at the Gantt chart for the first time immediately knows that the week and the month and obviously also the year is shown. Next to the pro tip that I've just shown you, there's one more that will not only increase the production speed, but also the convenience of using a Think Cell Gantt chart. So let's say you want to insert additional activity bars in the Gantt chart. You can either do it just by right click and then inserting a new bar, or alternatively, you can use an existing bar, click on it, click Shift and Control, and again with the left mouse click you can pull it downwards or to the position where you want to insert it on the Gantt chart. Release and it's copied to this place. You want to change it, again change the bar as we've discussed before. Further, if you have dependent activities in the Gantt chart, you can also link them. So let's say our activity here is dependent on our SEP activity above. To make them linked, just use this handlebar and pull it to the red trigger to the respective activity or element. Now you can see this little icon, it says attached to the anchor, and if you release, now the activity is attached to this anchor, which is also represented by this symbol. So if you now change the duration of one of the activities, the other activity will change automatically. So if you really want to get familiar with the different Think Cell Gantt chart functionalities, I highly recommend just playing around with them a little bit. There's so much more to discover, for example, shading individual rows. So if you want me to create another video about a different type of Think Cell chart, just let me know in the comments down below. So don't forget to subscribe the channel such that you do not miss any of the future tutorials. Also, I'd highly appreciate if you would give it a thumbs up if you learned something today, and see you next time.